Good morning, everyone. My name's John Ennis, curator producer at Journeys in Design, and welcome to our Chasing Rainbows program. It's Friday, which means it gives us a chance to explore rainbows and colours in other cultures. We've been to Ireland with Mary Mullen. We've been to India with Anu Sahu. And today I'm delighted to be joined from Ghana by the extraordinary and wonderful colleague, Renee Neblett. Renee, hello.
Hey, John, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I thought I was interrupting your writing there. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
You're looking angelic with the window light behind you. It's very beautiful. Great to see you.
Thank you.
So look, we're here talking about cultures as they relate to colour, and I've been lucky to visit you in Ghana. Super fond memories, but my memories of colour are of these wonderful markets, particularly the women wrapped in their beautiful cloth, and in fact of kente cloth itself. And the eagle-eyed may notice behind me that I have a drape of kente cloth on show for today's conversation.
Lovely.
And there's also something of the colour of politics. Here's me, a white guy in Scotland. Here's you, a woman of colour in Ghana. And I don't want to let that opportunity slip, because when we've talked about the politics of colour, I've been very engaged and inspired. So I don't want that to dictate our conversation, but you know what? Politics really underlines much of what we both do. I'm talking about politics with a small p. But of course, I do want mostly right now to pause and remember the person that brought us together. She's no longer with us, and I'm talking about the extraordinary, inspiring designer and architect, Alero Olimpio. So Alero and I met 20 years ago, and that was the first time that I got to visit Ghana. She is an extraordinary woman, and she brought us together as well. And I often think simultaneously of her wonderful smile when I see yours. Alero,
Thank you.
Alero really did bring great light, colour, and inspiration to pretty much everyone who met her, and even strangers felt the glow and warmth of her incredible presence. So I do want to just smile back at Alero as we're having our conversation this morning. So there we are.
Exactly.
We were brought together through Alero, and in fact, also on the shelf here, I have two pieces. One is the brick, the mud brick. So Alero and I worked together to develop a business, a sustainable building business. If I can just mention it for 2 minutes. Essentially, laterite, that rich red earth, to use another colour theme, common in West Africa, in Arizona, in the outback of Australia. Anyway, it's an extraordinary earth, and Alero's expertise came in looking at that. And, you know, with a little cement, about 20% cement, you can solidify it in the sun with water to bricks. And that is a laterite brick made in Ghana by Alero. So what we did was work with the amazing team in Oyaville in India and import some brick making machinery, two machines. And essentially we bought some land in Ghana where there was laterite, and there was this incredible sustainable approach to building, which replaced the nasty concrete breeze block mentality of much new development with a classic Adobe approach. We dug up the laterite, we added a little cement, we trained up the teams, and we produced the bricks on which we built the foundations and then the houses. So there was such a circular economy in what we were doing. And, you know, that experience was one of the first that I had directly in a circular economy of building and construction. Now that has such big, who knows what 20 years later one might be doing. And this later this year, we're launching, Journeys in Design is launching a new program called Concrete Designs to Thrive, Spaces and Places for Living Well. And I'm inspired by that early work with Alero to think about what it is to live in a place, in a space, in a house, in a home, in a building, at work, on the streets, in our parks. And that seed was planted by that woman. So I'm very grateful that her energy is passed on into other projects that we are actively engaged with. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how you and Alero engage in relation to building?
Yeah, well, I mean, pretty much the same. I was in Ghana with the intention of wanting to build.
I'm doing something an interview shouldn't do, and that's assume everyone knows who I'm speaking to because they're a dear friend of mine. Would you first like to say, I'd like to say, Renee Neblett, educator, designer, thinker, curator, and passionate advocate of the human being. Would you like to say a little bit about yourself and how you came to Ghana?
Well, thanks for that. You know, I mean, essentially, I came to Ghana from the United States really with the the intention of wanting to find a place in Africa to create an educational program. My goal really was to extend the parameters of American education to include study in Africa, to imagine there were other places to go besides Europe. That fundamentally was my goal. And from that vantage point from America, you know, I mean, America is an old world. I mean, Africa is an old world to the Americas as Europe is. Okay, and since I was young, I was made to understand that everything we know that distinguishes American culture from European culture has to do with the African and American coming together, whether we're talking about the economy of America, whether we're talking about the culture of America, or even the evolution of democracy.
We are going to the United States. We're going to the United States next Friday for our final look at culture and color. So we'll talk a bit more about the United States specifically next week. But from the Ghanaian point of view, one of the political links that I remember strongly was Bill Clinton's visit to Ghana, and Ghana really being granted favored nation status at that point. And how did that interact with the work that you had then established, the educational institute you had established?
Well, I mean, obviously that was a really great moment in time. You know, Ghanaians were completely enamored with Bill Clinton. He as a Southerner coming from America and I think a pretty open and decent human being, really relished the opportunity and celebrated the color of Ghana and the energy and the music. I mean, he could recognize so much of that experience that as a young Southern boy, he had some access to in America. So that was quite exciting, you know.
Absolutely. And you were able to take part in some of the organization for that. But there you are from, I believe, what was it, 1991? So almost 30 years ago that you arrived first.
Yeah, I actually came in I came in 1989, but I actually put foot on the land in Kokrobite, where Alero and I, with your assistance, helped to build Kokrobite Institute. And what I like to tell people in those days, 30 years ago, what was so amazing is this was a completely virgin landscape. I'd never experienced anything like it. I had never been any place where daily life was taking place that didn't have all the amenities I was used to, you know, running water, electricity. You know, it was just this hub of energy, you know, the fishermen out in the morning, the people.
So that rhythm of life
the rhythm of
life and the resourcefulness, right. Those elements, the rhythm of life and the resourcefulness of people impressed you from the word go. You reminded me of something that Alero had said to me. Look, if you can learn to shower in a cup of water, you know how to sustain a life. And there was something that struck with me, a chord with that. And I think how interesting.
You know, John, what's so amazing about that? You know what's interesting about that, John, that cup of water, is when you use a cup of water, you know, people who carry water on their head really understand how precious it is. And, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's a cup or a tub, it gives you the same, you know, it cleans you and it gives you the same joy. You know, even when it's just a cup of water, it gives you the same joy.
You have carried that. You know where that's from, and you know what's going to happen to it. There's an intimacy with those fundamentals of life. Now, you've been 30 years in a country.
Exactly.
I was very honored that you were able to come to Edinburgh and share some of that experience with one of our Twilight talks about design. And we talked at that, or you rather talked then, and it was very well received, about the notion of progress and how we might look at what's happened. There you are in this, you talk about this verdant virgin land, if you like. What are your reflections on the 30 years, the generation that you've been there?
Yeah, well, what's really interesting is I've lived here long enough to observe what so-called development, you know, this kind of imported development looks like. And, you know, what kind of masquerades as progress, which for me has almost been the opposite. You know, the very things that enamored me when I came, the resourcefulness of the people, the incredible intelligence that I met here, and a kind of literacy that was foreign to me, where local people knew everything about the flora and the fauna. They knew the name of every tree, or they knew what the bark could do, what the root could do, what the leaf could do. I mean, there was an extraordinary intelligence. And in the face of this kind of onslaught of so-called development, that traditional and essential knowledge is being lost. Not because the children, of course, don't aspire to the occupations of their parents. They don't want to be fishermen and farmers. And because that system or that community of knowledge sharing has been interfered with, they don't have the knowledge their parents had. So they're actually less better off than their parents were. Their parents at least had agency in the world they lived in.
I think this is such an important and significant issue for all around the world and whatever. If you're goal orientated towards something that fundamentally isn't in tune with your environment, that can lead to problems. What sort of problems have you seen that over this 30 years bring to so-called progress and development?
Well, I mean, all kinds of problems. I mean, people are dealing with materials they have no understanding about. They're used to eating their banana or whatever and dropping the peeling on the ground, and it biodegrades. Now everything is wrapped in a plastic container that litters the landscape, chokes the gutters, you know, creates health issues completely. And there's a kind of lethargy people have when they no longer have access to things that provide them life-sustaining things. When everything they need depends on their getting money for it. It's a huge shift in the way people relate to their environment, and a huge shift in how people relate to one another.
Now, I'm going to bring you to a word that you used, and fundamentally, I see you as this extraordinary combination of educationalist and entrepreneur, and a belief in the doing it. So we talked a little bit before we had this conversation, and I was remembering, I mean, when the invite came to visit Ghana, I was thinking of the Northern Irish Tourist Board in the 1980s, when no one wanted to visit Belfast. There was this wonderful phrase, "You never know until you go." Now, something about that has stuck with me since I was a kid. And I just saw Ghana as that opportunity. Now, that was back in 1998, would you believe? But you used a word there which I want to draw you back to as an educationalist. You used the word literacy. When we've talked, you've talked about almost redefining what that word is, and you've hinted at that redefinition. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Sure. I mean, I think like most of us, I confine the idea of being literate or literacy to the ability to read, write, and comprehend the written and spoken word. But since I've been here, I've learned to understand that there's an expanded version of that, that real literacy is at least as well as the ability to read your environment, to know where you are, what's around you, what nature gives you, and what you need to give it so that it keeps giving. That's real literacy. That's fundamental literacy.
That's fundamental literacy. Now, I could go lots of different ways with this conversation, but I'd like to take you to one of the more direct routes. And I've got, you know, we're all about, in Journeys in Design is all about object culture, offering up something that then tells a story of something bigger. And in my hand, I've got a wonderful set of cards here. The first one we've used as our little image logo for this conversation is for Africa. This is a set of flashcards of a series. Would you like to tell us a little bit about these flashcards? Produced by yourself at Cokrabite.
Yeah, actually, they were a byproduct of one of our first social entrepreneurship initiatives. You know, as you noted, being in Ghana and in this village for such a long time, I observed a number of changes. And one of the changes, obviously, was the young people, the youth being estranged and really having no, you know, not knowing what their parents knew, but not having the skills to access that world of the emerging market economy. So it made us feel responsible at Cokrabite to somehow try to develop some training or provide some opportunity for young people to be gainfully employed. And that intersected with our idea about environmental sustainability and intersected with our sense of responsibility around education. And so we decided to make a recycled school bag as a symbol of the importance of education, as a symbol of the importance of resourceful design, how you can take waste material and add value through design. And then also to broaden the base of who engages in that discussion. And so we took the idea to a large company, a fast-moving consumer goods company, and said, look, we have an opportunity. We'd like to produce 25,000 school bags. Could you help us do that? You could brand it. In fact, you could begin to see an opportunity to use your social responsibility activities to provide reading and learning materials to young people. And not only would you be doing a service for the nation, but you'd also extend your brand presence. And so that's how that came about.
Oh, wonderful. So
and
that
of
was
course,
the school bag. Can I ask what the school bags were made of?
Yeah, we were kind of influenced. You know, there was a product in Switzerland years ago, the kind of messenger bags they did. And they used these big pieces of material that were on the big trucks. We couldn't get that material.
Tarpaulin,
so we used
like a covering.
Tarpaulin, exactly, like a tarpaulin, exactly. So we use the advertising flexi, that material that they make the large advertising banners out of.
Yes.
And we use that material. We used PVC pipe that we cut to make rings out of. We used inner tube, and we made the logo out of soda cans, the silver soda, the aluminum soda cans, because they were kind of waterproof, and made the black star. We called the school bag the GSB, Ghana School Bag, celebrating the black star, which is the symbol of Ghana.
The Ghana independence. Hi, absolutely. Again, it's a circular economy of design. It has environmental preservation, and in terms of your definition of literacy, something of the education for a broader literacy in the product that's there. So the school bag and the flash,
exactly,
very important. Really what we're talking about, if you don't mind me extending it, is beyond education, beyond sustainable product design, into an area we might call design activism. Using design to influence opinion and approaches. I always have to remember my last career in general practice, and there were two things I couldn't give people as a GP. One of them was a holiday. And I don't mean that facetiously. I mean, however chaotic your normal schedule might be, time away so that this gets to do something different in a different environment is what I mean. And so the term holiday is a proxy. The other thing that I couldn't give people and desperately wanted to was a job. And again, I don't say that facetiously. I say that because a job is so core to health from the basis of self-respect and capacity to be in the world. We're born with that sense of belonging and of wanting to be and give. And I use that in my current thinking when I talk about exhibitions, talks, walks, and workshops. They're an opportunity for productive fellowship. So I can give some small number of people a job and directly corroborate, and we have a core team of 5 and their employees in that sense, although we're very collegiate in how we approach things. But more, those exhibitions, talks, walks, and workshops are about productive fellowship, bringing people together with a common interest to do something with each other. And it strikes me that that is right at the core of what you're doing, but you're managing to do it. You're managed to upscale that with actual jobs at times. Is that in tune with your,
yeah.
I mean, it strikes me that I've learned that from you.
Yeah, and you know, what's nice about this conversation is once you introduce that language to me of kind of design activism, it made me really think about design in a different way. I mean, when I think of design as a verb, you know, we're talking about the process of creation. When I think of activism, I think of relationships that intertwine the social, the economic, the aesthetic, the political. And once you see design in that kind of broader, more encompassing way, what you're doing is bringing communities together to think together and to imagine together how we can collectively make an impact.
I'm going to write everything you've just said down and I may publish. I would say, and I think our time is almost up, that we're touching on something I think that is at the heart of the global experience at the moment with this extraordinary situation we're all managing. Lockdown in Scotland has meant an hour's out every day for exercise, which is easing a little bit now. Weekly, if you can, shop for essentials, and then a lot of time with ourselves. And that goes all sorts of ways, and creative minds have been stimulated by that, others have been blocked. And I speak to creatives up and down Scotland, and there's a variation in how folk are managing that. One thing it has made me do is reevaluate, re-engage with nature, and actually pause. And something about the energy of the pause and the time to think has been enormously helpful for me on a personal basis and in some relations with family and friends. And I think I wonder how the global experience of lockdown compares and whether that isn't a common theme. How has that been for you? What's happening in Accra, in Ghana? I should have said initially, Ghana, West Africa, Accra, the capital, and Kokrobite, formerly a little village distant, now amalgamating with the progress we've been talking about. But yes, lockdown and Kokrobite, what's it meant for you?
Well, very much the same experience of having to kind of have an opportunity to reflect and think, but in that reflection and thinking, to really put things in perspective, to kind of value what things really take a kind of prominence in terms of importance. And I think all the issues we're engaged, and I think people, very important things, how we eat and what we eat, who we're engaged with, where we live and how we live, what our expectations are of things near and far. All those things somehow have been brought to our attention. And I think what I'm most grateful for as a person like you that's involved and interested in global well-being and global citizenship and, you know, social activism, is that this moment has given an entire world a common experience and a common reference point. So now when we engage in some of these conversations that before seemed so kind of hippy dippy or, you know, off the charts or idealistic, people now have a reference point that may be able to be understood in different ways. And I think I'm grateful for that.
Hear, hear. I think we're going to finish up now. I think we started with our journey in many ways with color, and I've been able to capture some of the color of Ghana in things like the Kente cloth and your wonderful literacy cards. But you're there. What's the sense of color that you have of the place that you're in?
You know, it's kind of, you know, coming off your kind of chasing rainbows. I mean, Ghana is like a rainbow. You know, there's color everywhere. There's color in movement, there's color in talk, there's color in dress, there's the sun, there's pure energy. And I think that, you know, forget the flora around you and everything, you know, growing at fast forward speeds. You know, you're just made aware of the joy of color and the need for color and how much it means to all of us.
Renee, it's been, of course, an absolute pleasure to speak to you. I think as we emerge from these strange and challenging times, your voice is one that I would love to hear more of. I look forward to the day you're back in Scotland and able to speak to us again. As we, I guess, design our way out of the current situation, I hope that we can give Mother Nature and the environment a seat at the design table that lets us emerge with that in mind. Thank you so much for speaking to us, and please give my love to everyone there with you at Cokrabiti. And yes, let's hope it's not too long before we can give each other a big hug.
Absolutely. And John, thank you so much for the work you do. It's amazing, and so happy to be part of it.
Fantastic. Well, great to see you, and we'll speak soon. Bye-bye.
Ciao.